I think Bitcoin somewhere north of 200 and ETH closer to 15K. But I think we finished the cycle with Bitcoin close to 400 and ETH closer to 40,000.
I want to talk through kind of various assets. I'll just kind of throw out, kind of a corner of the industry or one of the main assets in the industry. You just riff on, kind of your current thoughts of them. So let's start with Bitcoin as kind of the largest market cap asset. Where do you think we are with Bitcoin, with adoption and kind of from a market structure standpoint?
So Bitcoin from a market structure has been incredibly bullish. The pattern now, the chart pattern looks very similar to a smaller version of the one from March to June 2020, where it exploded. We've had this lovely corrective phase. We see all the on-chain stuff, William Clemente, and Willy Woo, and all those guys showing that it's all going into good, strong hands. We had the China FUD. We've had a bunch of FUD. This usually, and there's no guarantees, usually October, November, December is ridiculously good, particularly at this point in the halving cycle. So structurally, it looks amazing. So, okay, who are the buyers here? So most people who got into crypto came in via Bitcoin. That's always the case. It's the big daddy asset. And then people move out the risk curve, and that's pretty normal. So who's the next big buyer of Bitcoin? It's pretty clear to me who they are. It is the ongoing institutions. I mean, that just keeps going. And I think we'll see an acceleration in that, particularly if the price breaks out, because everybody's like sheep. They always want to follow each other. Secondly, it is the coming ETF. It's definitely going to, well, definitely, I don't know that, but I just have a very strong feeling it comes in the next, over this October, November, December period. And that will drive a huge amount of money in the space because it allows RIAs to allocate and ordinary individuals in a way that they can easily understand. And finally, I think we're starting to see noise from the sovereign wealth funds. So I know some of them, and I've talked about this before with you, is some of them are already allocated, but I think we're going to start to see more sovereign wealth activity in the space.
Ethereum and the Ether asset?
So Ethereum, again, the charts look absolutely astonishing. The on-chain activity, the adoption is by far the largest of anything in the space. So it's huge what's going on. The move towards ETH 2.0 means that, at a simple level, everybody's going to stake everything they've got to get it there. And so that takes all the coins off the market. There's about 11% of all ETH in circulation. So it's almost unbuyable. So you bring a whale into the market, the price just explodes. So I've never really seen a setup as good as this in that respect. So I think it's a very high quality bet for the time being, because of all of this stuff that's either off exchange, being staked, and there's no free supply, and demand keeps going exponential. So I like ETH overall. What's interesting is we're starting to see institutional adoption. So I spoke at Cowen's big event, and it wasn't about Bitcoin. It was solely about Ethereum, which took me by surprise. That's the first one I've done. It's kind of been referenced in other ones, but here I am now speaking to investment banks when they're asking me to come and talk about Ethereum, and just skipping Bitcoin, saying, well, we assume you know Bitcoin, but here's another opportunity. So I think there's a lot more adoption to come in that space. And I think there's going to be an ETF there too. And again, with this really restricted supply that's going on because of ETH 2.0, I think it drives prices a lot.
When you think about the institutions that are thinking about or talking about Ethereum and Ether, is it because they've already allocated to Bitcoin, or do you see some of them coming in and they're basically actually skipping over Bitcoin?
I think there are some that are skipping over Bitcoin because they get their head around it in a different way, because they think of it as a way of playing the entire technology of the space. So then they don't, it's hard for many of these institutions to stomach the narrative, the Bitcoin narrative of a store of value that central banks are destroying the world and a lot of this stuff, because that kind of goes against a bit of their business model. But Ethereum is not as, it doesn't feel like it's attacking them as much, because it's like, here's a space and we're building decentralized finance on it, and everybody can participate. It doesn't feel that they have to change their internal narratives. So some are finding it just a bit easier to get their heads around what it is without kind of going against or kind of exposing the Wizard of Oz, which is the central banks and what they're doing to currencies overall.
Let's talk about what I'll call Ethereum competitors. Maybe some of them aren't necessarily competitive; they're more complementary. But like the smart contract platform. So this is Polkadot, this is Solana, and there's kind of a whole group of those that are out there. How do you look at those assets?
So all I do is look at adoption effects, because I'm not smart enough to figure out what chain's better than what and why they want to build on it, et cetera, et cetera. But interestingly, as I've mentioned before, Ethereum is exactly following Bitcoin in 2017 in both price and price structure. Bitcoin is following Bitcoin 2013, which is fascinating, in price structure, but not in price itself. And then so I thought, you know what? I bet you Solana is following Ethereum in 2017. If anybody was in that market at that time, Ethereum was the rocket ship that took everybody by surprise. And guess what? It's exact chart fit, and the prices are the same. So Solana is exactly following Ethereum. Ethereum's exactly following Bitcoin. It's like the magic is all in this network adoption, and it kind of all makes sense. The other two that are in that kind of fast growth, fast adoption phase where you see exponential price rises more than anything else is obviously Terra, probably Avalanche, and probably Polkadot. And I think, they will all do well in this cycle. And like Ethereum, they'll all go down a lot later. And then from that, we'll see how it builds out. But it's bizarrely consistent. I never thought this would be the case, because you see all the people online, it's like, my project. But when you net balance it all out and just apply like adoption effects and do these things look similar, they're almost identical, which is amazing.
What does your portfolio look like right now? I know you were kind of all Bitcoin, then you went Bitcoin and Ether. What does that look like today, so people just understand the perspective you're coming from?
My current allocation is probably 70% ETH, 5% Bitcoin, and then a tail of others. So why that allocation? It's nothing against Bitcoin. It's not against anything else. It's because I'm a financial markets guy and we use risk curves. So at certain points in the cycle, in the middle of a bull market, you want to take as much risk as possible. So you want to go to the more speculative end of the market. So firstly, I isolated the fact that I thought Ethereum was going to see further flows. It's early in its adoption cycle, and that will probably drive prices further than Bitcoin, and that seems to be playing out. With the others, there's so much going on, it's difficult to monitor. So I have kind of basically a relatively broad-based portfolio to capture some of that move when the tail goes up, i.e. the furthest risk out. And that happens in credit markets, equity markets, all over the place. In equity markets, in a bull market, you tend to get the big leaders first, which is where the safe money is, the blue chips. Then eventually people move to emerging markets, and then they move to frontier markets. And it's in order to get more bang for your buck in the middle of the cycle and generate some alpha. So it's not a comment per se on my relative view on the success of protocols or something like Bitcoin. It's nothing to do with that. It's about, how do I make money out of this crypto investment whilst maintaining my level of interest in the overall crypto world. And so that's where I am now. Where would it be in a year's time? Maybe it's much more Bitcoin again. So it's an asset allocation strategy to try and enhance rewards.
Will you then look to kind of consolidate into the large caps in a bear market if you think that's where we're headed? Or do you, how do you think about the transition?
I'm trying to get my head around this. And I'm thinking that, yes, I will move down the risk curve back to the safer assets where I think there's less volatility. You can use, some yield from stable coins or staking or whatever to lower your volatility. And then you want to be looking to buy the speculative end of the market that's going to get destroyed, whether it's parts of the NFT space or parts of the kind of general token space that gets destroyed in the next bear market. to buy those when they're heavily discounted, but they still have network adoption effects or some perceived value or cash flow, that becomes really interesting, because then you can start allocating in the middle of a bear market into the riskier assets to buy them super cheap. And that's typical of credit markets and equity markets. People always do the same. And that's where you get the alpha from, is getting this asset allocation right. And very few people do it because they're still a little bit blinkered to one project. And the idea is you can believe the whole space goes up. You can even have total belief in one project, but it's a long time to get there. So is your allocation weighted correctly for you to reduce the volatility a bit so you can sleep at night in the bad times and get a bit of extra outperformance in the good times?
All right, I want to wrap up with the question we ask everyone. We need a Bitcoin price prediction by end of year, and I need an Ethereum price prediction by end of year. What do you got for us?
I was doing some work on this on the weekend for Global Macro Investor. I'm kind of thinking, I'm kind of a little bit overly bullish right now. And I think the cycle, well, no, because that's not fair, because I was looking at the cycle itself. I think Bitcoin somewhere north of 200 and ETH closer to 15K. But I think we finished the cycle with Bitcoin close to 400 and ETH closer to 40,000.
All right. So you think by end of year, we've got Bitcoin 200K or so. We've got ETH at 15K. You think end of cycle, which in your opinion, it sounds like kind of February, March of next year.
Something like that, yeah.
Bitcoin's 400,000 and ETH is 40,000.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people watching who hope you're right.
I bloody hope so too. It's not like I haven't backed my own bet. So my money's where my mouth is.